Audio festivalis Banguoja. Projekto partneriai.
Jūsų vardas?
Kauno radio gamykla.
Gimimo data?
1956 metų, birželio mėnesio 19 diena.
Legendinė Žaliakalnio karūna atgimsta. Aš tapsiu unikalią erdvę darbui ir gyvenimui. Erdvė tavo ritmui. Nuo šiol mano vardas Radio City. Kuria situs.
Daugiau radio dokumentikos ir laidų įrašų rasite LRT audiotekoje. Laisvė klausytis.
Myliu save. Nebegėda.lt. Mylėti save begėdiškai malonu.
Projektą finansuoja Lietuvos kultūros taryba ir Jungtinių Amerikos valstijų ambasada Lietuvoje. Organizatorius Nepatogus kinas.
You kind of lose all sense of time. I didn't sleep because I was afraid I'd oversleep and wouldn't make the flight. There was a queue for security, and I just had this really strong sense of standing in that line and looking at other women, thinking, is it you? Are you travelling too? All the clinics required you to stay overnight for the abortion pill. And I couldn't do that, which meant I knew I was facing into a surgical abortion, to be back and forth in one day.
Please ensure that your seatbelt is fastened, your seat back is in the fully upright position, and that your tray table is stowed away.
And I just felt angry so angry all the time. And wanting to get it over with, and wanting to just be home and out the other side. And that anger, I think, that's what drove me all the way through.
The campers went home.
Now tonight, much of Ireland will be transfixed by the final of the Rose of Tralee International Festival.
The annual festival crowns one young woman the winner following a week of judges assessing how well she behaves and represents her home country.
If you don't know anything about it, it features about 30 women with Irish heritage competing for the title Tralee Rose.
Sydney Rose, Brianna Parkins, was writing about her experience in the Irish Times recently, where she said that being the Sydney Rose was both the best and the worst year of her life. Well, she joins us live now from Sydney.
My name is Brianna Parkins. I was the 2016 Sydney Rose of Tralee, or as many people remember me, your one who gave out about abortion. The Rose of Tralee is a pageant without being a pageant. It doesn't have a swimsuit competition. You are not judged on looks. There's no world peace. There's no pouting. There's no posing. There's no modelling. Millions of people watching. Big live TV event. It's sort of like Eurovision in a lot of ways because it's so cheesy, but everyone watches it. The backstory to this whole thing is when I landed in Dublin, the repeal mural, the Mesa Art one, had just been taken down. Dublin City Council said it was too political, and that's sort of when the repeal movement got a big social media boost, and you had these women with jumpers and these T-shirts.
Now, thousands of people are expected to take to the streets of Dublin as part of the Rise and Repeal March, which calls for abortion to be made legal.
I just wanted a T-shirt. And I hadn't meant to wear it on the thing at all. It was just sort of, I might wear it at the end of it. I'm flying out going, hi, Sydney Rose supports you. Like at the very end, probably as a small personal thing rather than like a big statement. And I'm reading more and more about repeal while I'm there. And I'm getting angrier and angrier. About the situation in Ireland where we basically said to women, we don't trust you, you're irresponsible, you can't make these decisions for yourself. women who had wanted to have children and had non-viable pregnancies and then had been forced to go to England and then bring the remains of their child back in a shoebox in the boot of their car to have a burial. Women who have been made to miscarry over days and days and days, almost turning septic because the doctor can't just do a D&C and step in. And so this is just bubbling away inside me. And I start to think, how can I be a women's rights activist if this thing is happening before me, in front of me, in this country? What kind of hypocrite would I be if I got up and then just didn't mention the very obvious elephant in the room?
Right, well, where are we off to next? This year's Sydney Rose is 25-year-old journalist Brianna Parkins, whose mum's family hail from Dublin's Liberty.
I remember going out on stage, they make you wave to the camera, like, then the Sydney Rose, and you like do this really daggy wave to the camera, and I thought, right, now I can't. I've changed my mind. Can't do it. Not happening.
Sydney Rose, Brianna Parkins.
Get through the whole interview, not even thinking about it. I'm like, oh, no, I backed out. I'll wimp out and I'll do like a lame tweet about it later on, about like, oh, but actually I meant this. This is fine, I can live with myself. I'll just go home and it'll be fine. But then he asked me about the women's rights question.
You're also a campaigner for women's rights, focusing on domestic violence.
I am, because in Australia we just had our funding cut for domestic violence.
I just remember it coming out of my mouth. I just remember taking a deep breath and being like, I'm like, we should do better in Sydney.
And it's just not on, and I think we can do better. Mm-hmm. And I think we can do better here in Ireland. I think it's time to give women a say on their own reproductive rights, and I would love to see a referendum on the 8th.
Time stopped. Like I just felt like the collective intake of breath. Did she just say that? You can feel your heart beating, you can hear it, and the blood rushing.
I think it's time to give women a say.
To me, it was just deafening silence.
And I would love to see a referendum on the 8th coming up soon. That'd be my dream.
But when I watch the tape back, I can hear applause. So there must have been applause, but I couldn't hear it. I just turned to the host with a smile, like, yep, I've just done that, and you're going to have to now wear this. And without taking a breath.
You have had a very busy time with your hair.
I have.
He had the smoothest transition I have ever seen from abortion to let's do a samba dance.
So you are a great samba dancer.
I wouldn't say great,
well,
I'd say competent.
Oh, and you like samba, let's do that now.
We've only kind of rehearsed this once or twice, and apparently it's Hendo 3, 1, 2, 3, so it should be fairly straightforward.
Yeah, if you can count to 3, you've got it.
Didn't miss a beat, like consummate professional.
We are stepping back on our right foot.
Okay.
And we're going.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3.
And then the next day, of course, I was on the front page of every newspaper. Sydney Rose yells about abortion. Twitter is just going off. Go back to where you came from. You're not Irish. Go home. How could you send a baby murdering girl over? Is she a plant? You'll pay. You'll be sent to hell. We'll send you there ourselves. We know what hotel you're in. Because they do. Like, we stay in this one hotel called the Rose Hotel. We're all on one floor. We had our names outside on the door, so I took my name off. Threats keep rolling in. The most upsetting ones are probably rape threats. Really graphic details, like, I'm gonna do this, this, and this to you. I'm gonna rape you and you're gonna love it, and X, Y, and Z. And I'm just getting bombarded. And I thought, you know what, I'm not gonna let them show that I'm afraid. So I put up a photo. I dug out the t-shirt, put the t-shirt on and said, you know what, repeal the 8. Thanks for the support. I remember watching the dawn break over this little back street in Tralee and thinking, it's going to be okay. You'll move on. They'll forget about it. It's a 24-hour news cycle. You're just a contestant. You said a thing. People get over it. And they didn't.
There is a sense of quietness about the day. In the waiting room first I heard one Irish accent, and then you move to a second waiting room and there were a number of us with the wheelie cases, and then you hear people talking on the phone, or you hear them asking a nurse a question, and you're aware that, you know, you're one of 6 in that clinic on that day. And that was shocking to me, And I shouldn't have been, because all the statistics would have backed it up. But to be actually there on that day, on a random day, with 5 other women was just, it was devastating. At one point, the nurse went through asking when our flight times were so that they could line us up according to surgery to give us the maximum amount of recovery time. One of the women said, I can't believe I booked the 6:10 flight. What was I thinking? I wasn't expecting to be delayed. And she got to go first. She got to go first. It sounds ridiculous. We weren't queuing for a fun fair ride, but she was taken in first for surgery, and the nurse was going through everything that we could and couldn't do after a general anaesthetic. And one of the things that she came up with was, you can't drive because you've had a general anaesthetic. We were all driving back to various parts of the country. I mean, I was lucky I was going to Dublin from the airport, but there were other women who were going to Limerick, going to Kilkenny. There was one girl who was very young and very quiet and just kept herself to herself. And then when that other woman made the comment about her flight time, I just said something to the effect of, I can't believe this is happening to us. Isn't this ridiculous, that we're having to think about this. And I'll never forget, I was sitting right next to her and she had blonde hair kind of in her face. I said something like, we have to do something about this when we go home. This can't go on. She looked up and her hair kind of fell away from her face and she looked at me in horror. I mean, in horror, as if I was mad, and said, are you kidding me? I will never speak about this to anyone as long as I live.
I'm Siobhan McHugh, and I come from Dublin originally, and I live in Australia, in a place called Austinmere, which is a beautiful place by the ocean. I'm a radio documentary maker, but also an academic who teaches journalism at the University of Wollongong. Bree Parkins was a student of mine, and so I saw this stuff erupting on Twitter.
Referendum on the 8th, coming up soon.
I got really emotional, I got really moved, because I couldn't believe that, 35 years after I had essentially lost my career in Irish radio for having the temerity to have a woman on who would even articulate and offer opinions about women's need to control their own reproductive rights. 35 years later, a young woman I had taught, she had gone back from Australia to Ireland and she'd stood up in public and she had claimed the space and just said so beautifully and so strongly and with such conviction that what she wanted to see was women to get the rights over their own bodies and to see a repeal to the 8th Amendment. So 1983, somebody had the idea that abortion, although it was already completely illegal in Ireland, was not illegal enough. And they thought that it should be actually written into the Constitution that the right of the fetus was equal to the right of the pregnant woman, which would ensure that nobody could give precedence to the woman and allow an abortion. A referendum campaign began from the point of view of those who were against abortion. It was to put an amendment into the Constitution.
Meanwhile, in the Irish Republic, a fierce political argument is increasing the divisions between the Catholic and Protestant communities. The controversy concerns the emotive social issue of abortion.
Who in Ireland wants abortion? They are just a few misguided and evil people who, under the guise of greater freedom, would allow the same laws to be introduced into our country that have led to murder of millions every year throughout the world.
Abortion is already illegal, but some conservative Catholics are now seeking a referendum to make it impossible to change the law on abortion without a further referendum. In other words, they are trying to make the ban on abortion virtually irreversible.
And it divided the country like nothing since the Civil War. So there were families split down the middle and people not talking to each other. I was, I'd been living away from home for 10 years at that stage. So all my friends were very much in the anti-amendment camp. But I was aware in the radio station, and obviously from debates in the newspapers and all the rest of it, of how divisive the issue was. And we had a policy at the radio station at the time about what you could do, balance, objectivity, and certain items, if they were subject to upcoming votes, you couldn't discuss them except in a news format within a certain period of time before the referendum. To recognise that, but also to recognise the interest in the people on both sides of the debate, my radio show had a format where between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. we had somebody come into the studio, play 3 of their favourite records and, use that to sort of discuss their life history. And so I had proposed that one week we would have Anne Connolly as our guest, who had founded the Well Woman Centre, who could speak broadly about the new wave of feminism and women's rights. But she was not overtly identified with abortion. She was identified with women's rights to all kinds of reproductive and health rights. And the following week, for balance over the longer term, we would have Mina Ban E. Cribbin, who couldn't have been more different and would speak pro-amendment. And this we decided at our weekly production meeting, where we would all put forward our guests, and it was approved by the boss. In came Anne Connolly. We couldn't discuss the actual referendum, but we discussed all the other background things to it. Somewhere before 1 o'clock, I was called into the boss' office, and I was informed that I was being suspended, that I was, quote, not fit to produce programs with serious editorial content, and I would be reassigned. And I said, what have I done? It was vaguely framed. Somehow it was to do with the guest I'd had on. And I said, but you approved her. There was just this kind of almost a smile. No, I didn't.
Okay, well, my name is Anne Connolly, and back in 1978, I set up the Well Woman Centre in Dublin.
While abortion is illegal in Ireland, referring women to clinics in Britain is not. Anne Connolly runs a women's health centre in Dublin and meets a great many women who come to her wanting abortions.
Where do you stand as far as abortion is concerned?
Well, the policy of this particular clinic is that we believe the decision of the woman is hers, and we offer a counselling service. And if at the end of counselling she decides she wants to have an abortion, we are prepared to help her.
She can't have it here?
She can't have it here. No, the penalty for abortion here is life imprisonment, no matter what the circumstances are.
Life imprisonment?
Life imprisonment, even if it's a teenage rape case.
We couldn't get a landlord to give us a premises because of what we were doing. So the first challenge was finding somewhere. The second was finding doctors willing to work with us. We had a number of doctors at the very beginning, but about a week before we opened, they were told by the gynaecologist they reported to in the main acute hospital that they could choose between a career in that hospital or in the Well Woman. 2 nights before we opened, they told me they couldn't come to work, and I literally vomited from about 2 in the morning. I mean, my nerves were completely shot. Like, I was 23 at that stage. I knew nothing about employment, the sort of legalities of setting up a company. Ugh. We also then had an opening which attracted no media attention. So our first morning, we managed to get one doctor, but no patients. And then later that afternoon, a group of people from an emerging group called Society for Protection of the Unborn, SPUC, as we used to call them, with emphasis, picketed outside our clinic. And we rang the media, and the media were outside the door in 5 minutes, and we were the front page of the evening papers and the following morning's paper. And the rest was history, because we had been launched. We had advanced bookings for 100 beds every weekend. If a woman was deciding on a termination, the pressures on her were considerable, time-wise and financially. And because of the travel involved, it meant that most women wanted to be able to have the termination on the Saturday, so they could travel over Friday, come back Sunday, be back at work, be back at home, as though nothing had happened. Sometimes they would have told literally nobody. Literally nobody. What we would inevitably do is to say, look, we want one of the nurses here to stay with the Irish girls all the way before and spend a bit of time with them afterwards. So a lot of the clinics would go to trouble and find an Irish nurse, but it just meant that there was somebody to talk to in that period beforehand and somebody to be there afterwards that was there to look after them.
The one thing I do remember is the kindness of the nurses, the kindness of the staff and the normalcy of it, that it was, I think I was expecting kind of hushed tones and the staff speaking to you with their eyes averted and darkness and secrecy, and there wasn't. There was openness and warmth and care, and I because I'm so terrified of needles, they went over and above what they'd probably normally do to help me, and they held my hand when I had to get, the cannula in and stuff. I was complication free and it was relatively straightforward, but you're still sore. And to have to do that and then just get in the taxi and get on the airplane, it was horrible. It was horrible. And sitting, because you're so hungry, you have to eat. So sitting in the airport restaurant, eating with the bruise from the cannula on your hand, and you're kind of thinking, I wonder, does everyone see this and know what it is? My flight was late, so I was just, scrolling on Twitter and, catching up on emails, and that was when I saw the Rose of Tralee hashtag. And I remember seeing the link with the hashtag Repeal the 8th, and I actually do remember what got me, because you had that intake of breath when she said it.
I would love to see a referendum on the 8th coming up soon. That'd be my dream.
And then you heard the applause, and that applause was just like, oh my God, the applause. I remember, wanting to go to people, beside me. They're clapping. In Kerry, they're clapping, that applause was like a balm to me that day. This is other people saying it's okay. And I don't need other people to say it's okay, but it's nice today to know that. Plus, I want to buy that woman pints.
We would like to thank you for your attention, and we wish you a very pleasant flight.
I emailed Brianna to say thank you and to tell her where I was when I learned of what she'd done and how bizarre it was to be travelling back from my own abortion while she was lighting up the stage in Tralee.
And I read it and I cried. And then I, of course, emailed her straight back and like, oh, thank you so much for your letter. It really meant a lot to me.
She wrote back about how important it had been to receive my email because she'd had so much personal hassle over what she'd said and professional hassle and coming at her from all angles, and that my email and story, you know, made her feel like it was worth it.
And I just watched her go from anger to hope to action, and it was just so beautiful watching this woman who wouldn't even use her real name when she first emailed me because she was so scared of even publicly admitting that she had an abortion.
A week after I travelled, I had to go back to the UK with my family for a family occasion. I remember being in the airport and actively looking to see who's travelling today, who's making up the numbers today. My husband had the kids off somewhere in the shop buying something, and I remember sitting and I had to take the two sides of the chair in the airport in the terminal and hold it and grab them so tightly to stop myself from standing up on the chair and screaming at people, do you know what people are doing from here today? Do you know? Do you know? About 5 months later, I have to travel through the airport again, so I printed out 60, 80 stickers, and I plastered the airport angrily in them, and they were in the gents, they were in the women's, and I plastered Stansted Airport with them, and tube stations, on the plane. It started with travelling for an abortion. You're not alone. This airport holds the shadows of the tens of thousands of women who've travelled before you. We see you. We offer you strength and solidarity on your journey. We support you. Be well and get angry. They can't keep doing this to us. #repeal the 8th. It just made me feel better. And it's something I've done a few times when I've travelled since. Like a lifting. I remember like driving in and seeing the big Dublin Town Centre or whatever and thinking, I don't want to be anywhere else in the world right now. You could offer me any money. But after that exit poll last night, I want to be here today with my people, like with my Together for Yes people.
Following are the results of the 36th Amendment of the Constitution.
Everyone just coming in and waving and smiling and hugging.
Votes in favour of the proposal, 1,429,981.
It was phenomenal. Phenomenal. And then to meet Brianna then.
The vote count, when the vote came through, yes, and we just hugged, and it was just the nicest meeting.
She was emotional, I was emotional. It was just a lovely moment with someone that I don't know, but I'll always be connected to, like always. Always.